Well, hello and welcome. Good morning to you all, and welcome to the Bristol Life Business Club, Emerging into the New World, sponsored by Bevan Britain. Today is a commercial property special, and we'll be discussing a number of trends, a number of current situations in Bristol, both in the short term, but particularly for 2021, what it might mean, this great pause we've all been experiencing. I do hope you're in good shape, all things considered. My name is Greg from Media Clash, Bristol Life's publisher. We can't wait to start publishing Bristol Life again with our first issue out on September 18th. These business clubs with our sponsor Bevan Britain have focused on that sense of emerging, how we have all been changed by this, candid insights on how we're seeking to navigate through and respond to these continuingly strange times, personally, professionally, and managerially. I guess we're all wholly habituated now to these odd times. So it's really all about the plans for the autumn and the year to come. This session about commercial property is how this has changed as a result of this great pause, working from home, which may or indeed may not impact midterm appetites and values, which sectors are set more strongly, and the whole rationale for city centre-based activity. What are the longer term impacts of this? Before we start with our illustrious panel, and I'm really delighted they're joining us today, a few notices on behalf of us for Media Clash. 3 updates for you on our events and awards. Most pertinently, the Bristol Property Awards. These have now been put back, as I hope you know, until Friday, February the 12th at Ashton Gate. Nominations also have been put back until September 30th. We have had excellent support and understanding from our sponsors, led by our headliners, Smith & Williamson, indeed one of our panelists today. Our other sponsors, and I would like to thank them all, and it's quite a long and illustrious roster. Our other sponsors are Close Brothers, Vickery Holman, again on the panel today, Marsh Commercial, AWW, Blaze Commercial Finance, Bristol Life, Cotswold Homes, Horsell Construction, Optima, Origin, Original Style, Planning Portal, Rate Setter, Redland Court, Royds Withy King, Shawbrook Bank, Spaces, Regis, Wilmot Dixon, and YTL Construction. It's just a fabulous roster. We've had extraordinary support, and thank you so much. We rationalise that rather than trying to cling on to the belief that we might be able to just about get the awards away and run them this autumn, we should just make a clear decision to put them back to when they're much, much more likely to run. We think February the 12th is the right time for that. And we know from our conversations, it's quite heartening to hear that the awards play an important part in building relationships and business development, all the more so after what we've all been experiencing. And it'll be nearly a year without networking by the time those awards run, which is quite remarkable. The awards once more, property awards, will be once more a daytime event. So lunch, the awards, then time for those convivial business meetings, which are absolutely vital to this sector. Our second key awards are the Bristol Life Awards, and as a reminder, these are now running on September the 17th as a very high profile, unique combination of live presented events, recorded items featuring sponsors and some of the big names in Bristol, and live Zoom reactions from finalists and winners, all wrapped up in a, we hope, a gorgeously uber glam style. These were due to be held in the spring, but it's clearly that's not an option to run in real life at this point. And our experience in running very similar virtual events in Cardiff 3 weeks back, we are very, very confident of putting on an excellent show. But more than that, it's one with significantly greater reach. Cardiff had something like 3,500 logins and a further 2,800 views on YouTube. Full teams as well as friends and family were watching for free in a joyous celebration of the city. And it's exactly the same principle we're trying to capture for Bristol this time, probably on a larger scale. Again, we've had superb support from our sponsors, led from the front by the headline sponsor, Marsh Commercial. Again, thank you. The Bristol Life Business Clubs. These, as mentioned, are sponsored by Bevan Britain, and we will continue to run them virtually as today for the time being. And again, like all our others, they'll be posted on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do check out some of the other videos on the Bristol Life channel. It is great to hear the stories of businesses who have been navigating through this time, some very, very inspirational moments. The business clubs will return in real life to the Avon Gorge Hotel sometime January onwards. Bristol Life Business Surgeries, these are deep dives in key areas, and following our successful surgeries with Bevan Britton and Close Brothers, will be running these again in conjunction with leading professional service companies, legal, financial, marketing, tech. Please do talk to us. Perhaps that's enough of events, virtual or otherwise. The really big news for us, it's right deep in our soul as creative commercial people, is the return of the mothership of Bristol Life back to publishing on September the 18th. The first issue back is set to be particularly high profile. We're pushing it hard as a marketing campaign. There is a sense of renewal, of returning. It's a key moment for us, and we hope it'll be applauded by the city. If you want to be part of it, please talk to Derry Robbins editorially or Neil Snow commercially. The ad deadline is September 4th, so that's looming reasonably soon. We are very, very proud of our role in the city, proud of the campaign that the council has picked up of Bristol Together, and we'll be mighty, mighty proud to play our part celebrating this extraordinary city, issue in, issue out once more. Again, thank you for all your support. On to our session today. Our panellists, and if I could ask them to come forward as I give a few details of your bios. We have two Davids and a Paul, so if you could unmute yourselves and turn on your videos, I'll explain who our panellists are. So, hello and good morning to you. So, David Gage, Smith & Williamson, as mentioned, the Bristol Property Awards headline sponsor. His focus, strategic and commercial advice across multiple sectors. Particular area of expertise is around VAT, property and construction VAT, efficient structures to achieve optimal VAT recovery, advising on complex property transactions, including acquisitions, disposals, JV agreements, mixed-use developments, and resi conversions. Paul Matthews of Vickery Holman, again, as mentioned, one of our sponsors of the deal category at the Bristol Property Awards. General practice surveyor, joined Vickery Holman 18 months or so back in the general practice department, particularly on valuation work, as well as providing lease consultancy. Paul has over 35 years experience in the Bristol property market, having previously worked for such as Bruton Knowles, BNP Paribas, Fuller PC and Chesterton's. He's often asked, by the way, to act as an expert witness, which is, makes him even more appropriate for this panel, I suspect. Expert witness for landlords and tenants, advising on valuations, rent reviews, lease renewals and such. David Morris, Greg Latchams, Associate Director, Head of Construction. David works in both contentious and non-contentious construction, has wide-ranging experience in litigation, adjudication, mediation, and dispute resolution, drafting and advising on a range of documents, including development suites, building contracts, consultant appointments, collateral warranties, and bespoke terms and conditions. He joined Greg Lapchins in May 2014, having worked for law firms in two quite diverse cities of Los Angeles and Nottingham. So there's experience. Good morning to you all. How are you each today? And G, perhaps let's start with you. What's been different in your working world, and how have you been?
Good morning, Greg. What's been different? I suppose, like the majority of professional services firms, working from home. So balancing that work-life balance, especially with a 5-year-old running around at times. That's hard when you get the work phone call and they say, "Daddy, can I speak to them?" You know, we have had a partial return to the office, so there's about 30% of staff back in the office on a sort of ad hoc basis. So it's sort of returning to the new normal.
And is that a sort of fixed 30%, or is it a rotational 30% at any one time?
So the initial plan was obviously 30%, those that wanted to go back to the office, perhaps for a bit more collaboration, a bit more focused time if you had family. From September, the plan is to bring 50% back, and that will be on a sort of rotational basis, I believe. We just had an email this morning sort of outlining some of the plans.
Right, we're all you know, rapidly trying to acclimatise to this, and it does absolutely connect to commercial property, of course. Let's just ask Paul, how's it been for you, and what business have you been able to transact in these times?
Well, surprisingly, there's been a lot of business come back in the last month or so. After lockdown, instructions dried up. We put several staff into furlough as there wasn't work to be done, but it surprised us how quickly they came back in on stream. Business picked up. Banks are definitely still lending. Development schemes are going ahead, both commercial and residential. So it's almost back to normal, but it's not normal. It's a different world now.
However caveated, I think that's probably the most optimistic or positive I've heard of anyone on any of these sessions. Almost back to normal. Well,
Yeah, well, it's a different normal. That's the only thing.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I guess also that ultimately there's so much capital in the system, it has to find a home, and property, but whether resi or commercial, is not quite safe as houses perhaps, but it's a good home for capital.
It's a better bet, yes.
Right, let's ask David M. I'm going to call you by your initials, by the way. So David M. How's it been for you? And talk about Greg Latcham's during this time.
Well, I remember when it all started for two reasons. One was we found out my wife was pregnant with our second born, which was amazing, which was right at the end of March.
Congratulations.
And it was, thank you. During, she found out because she was being so sick. So I was on mother care, childcare, and that was the week where I had phone ringing off the hook because people from a construction point of view, some genuinely were scared for their lives, didn't want to go to work, didn't want anyone coming to work on their sites. Others were at the other extreme and just wanted to plow on. So it was genuinely the busiest week, I think, of my life. And we were saved by two things. One was a grandma who came to live with us for about 11 weeks. So childcare and mother care were taken care of. And then two, I think just helping people to realise that it didn't all just come to an end. The contract provisions, etc., just continued, and we had to just work with people to get those kind of messages across. I think a lot of people.
And tell us about Greg Latcham's about the coming back to the office, not coming back to work because you've been working remotely, but that sense of actually to an office space. How's that going?
Greg, well, we've. I mean, the phrase I think is agile. We're probably hearing a lot of that in the commercial property world at the moment, but we sort of moved to an agile model, which means for those who can and want to, the office is available at a very much reduced capacity. But if you're able to work from home, continue working from home. I'm actually having my second face-to-face, as in actual physical face-to-face, not like this client meeting, since March today.
Wow.
So I'll be going into the office, but work has continued. I mean, we're obviously there are many practices we do. Property is very much high on that list, and commercial properties, as you many of the delegates will know, did grind to somewhat of a halt. So we were hit pretty hard on that. But other things, I mean, construction's been pretty up and down, but steady, I would say. Resi again, and commercial property are picking up now.
That's keeping us at a top level for now. We'll come into some detail. Talk to us, each of you, perhaps, about your current state of confidence in the Bristol commercial property market. I know levels of inquiries, transactions. Give us some sort of barometer sense of what's happening. Who'd like to talk?
If I could talk about the residential market firstly, we do a lot of lending valuations on residential properties as well, and these are mixed, large and small. And the agents that we talk to who are setting up these deals have really come back with saying we're very active, we're getting instructions on the books, and we're getting deals going through. And this was happening, must be a month ago now. All of a sudden it lifted up. There seemed to have been a pent-up activity that has suddenly been released. So it's positive on the residential side.
And in part that's stamp duty related, do you think?
Possibly, yeah. I wouldn't say it was the major factor.
Right.
Yes,
but then commercially, how has it been, and what's your current confidence about the coming months?
Right. On the commercial side, it's very much a sector-led recovery. I think retail and leisure will both struggle in the months ahead and years ahead. They need to be reshaped. Leisure will hopefully come back, but that rather depends on COVID. But retail has been facing a sea change for years now. The high street is far too big for the amount of occupiers that are available. And there will be a shrinking. And I think local authorities, given the power from central government, who seem to be on a power grab move at the moment, leave it to the local authorities and they will reshape their centres.
If we may, let's come back to High Street as a very specific area. It's a very sad example of how the Great Pause has also been the great accelerator, that it's extended pre-existing trends. But if I ask either of the two Davids about your level of current confidence in the commercial property market in Bristol.
Of course, I mean, from our perspective, we've seen lots of sort of lease renegotiations, moving to turnover-based rents, which we would see as favourable to both the landlords and the tenants. There's obviously lots of government initiatives out there in terms of tax deferrals, business loans, etc. And businesses are being quite innovative at the moment, so they're branching out, they're doing things that they wouldn't do. Landlords are offering lease inducements, incentives. There's lots of sort of variations to leases. It's probably things that needed to happen a long time ago, and this has been the catalyst for that. So I think probably, I mean, I did hear about it sort of referred to as sort of Darwinism, effectively it's survival of the fittest in terms of the businesses, and perhaps there were some weaker businesses that perhaps were going to go under anyway, and this has just accelerated that. So probably going forward, those that remain on the high street, in my opinion, would be quite strong players.
Just to pick up that point about contingent leases or leases contingent on turnover, is that are some of those straight pro rata to turnover? Is it sort of step to thresholds of some sort?
There's all sorts of variations. Landlords have recognised that they need to change the model. You can't just have rent going up year on year, which is what historically they've had, and they've obviously had very long leases. So now they're sort of shorter term. There's incentives there to sort of perhaps landlords doing works to the properties to encourage people to use them. Variations across the board, to be honest, Greg.
Yeah, and David M, your sense of current confidence in the sector?
I think confidence is certainly lower than it's been. I mean, we can't hide from that, but I think the property is there, and I think potentially the most agile will win. I think it's back to that word. I agree with what David said. It's not just landlords and tenants that need to be agile, but developers and investors too. And there is a shift happening also in the centre of Bristol, with the traffic, etc. So it is going to reshape things, and we all have to be agile in I think, how we adapt to that.
There's a number of words which are in danger almost of being overused, but I agree entirely.
Sorry.
No, not at all. And it's much the same as pivoting. And essentially at the heart of it is people or companies being more entrepreneurial. They're trying to figure out what they're doing and changing to models that work, whether contingent or some variant on what they've done previously.
Yeah, agreed.
Talk about your sense of the recovery, and I don't want to sort of put it any more stronger than that. The governor of the Bank of England, still maybe 6 weeks back, I think it was, is talking about a V-shaped recovery. Others are talking about the Nike swoosh recovery. And so it's a sort of, it's not about the V, but it's a sort of shallower but still up recovery. Or indeed slower progress. What do you think specifically in commercial property for Bristol 2021 is going to be like in terms of recovery?
I think our hesitation says it all, really, doesn't it? I think I am a fan of the Nike swoosh, I think, but there's a lot of ifs and buts in there. I think I'm encouraged by the way the government are speaking. Certainly the rhetoric is helpful, and some of the measures they put in place I think are very good. Planning, it all sounds good. Obviously with planning it's going to be very technical, so we have to watch out for that. But I think if that encouragement and optimism continues, then I think 2021 may well be a slow start, but I think it could pick up.
Yeah. Do you share that, Paul, and the other David?
Yeah, I think that's true, although it's slightly orientated on sectors. I think, as I said, the retail and leisure market will struggle to recover, whereas the industrial sector will probably pick up better because as people are still doing more and more online shopping, there will be requirements for distribution outlets, small and large.
And by the way, for those watching this live, and we've got a very strong attendance this morning, please do ask questions, and I'll take those during this of whatever sort. You can ask them in your own name, as it were, or you can ask them anonymously if it's at all commercially sensitive. Let's move on to the working from home point. And of course, it's incredibly difficult to interpret this. But is this broadly, do you see this as a temporary, inevitable blip or a long-term game changer? Where are you on the scale of the impact of that on commercial property?
Personally, I think it is a long-term changer, and I think it's been always going to be happening. It's a trend that is, we spend an awful lot, or we previously spend an awful lot of time commuting, spending 2 hours a day, wasting our time in a queue to go into the centre of Bristol. I don't think we're going to revert to that. I think we're going to spend our time going into offices for meetings and client meetings and colleague meetings, but I don't think we're going to be sitting at our desk rigidly again. I don't think that's going to happen.
And for Smith and Williamson, David, do you concur with that? Is there some sort of company view on what it might look like next year?
I think it's interesting, Greg, isn't it? Because I was reading an article about 9/11 when people in New York had to work from home, and they were effectively saying that technology and broadband wasn't up to speed. And now suddenly we've had COVID, and actually companies have very quickly moved entire workforces to working from home. A lot of your professional services firms do work agile anyway, in terms of audit teams are on site. I would go to meetings. So I think there's no longer that need for sort of to be present in the office to show that you're working. And I think going forward, certainly at Smith and Williamson, we recognise that people work very well at home. And that trend will continue, that there will be a mixture of being in the office and not being in the office. Where you work will be at your discretion.
Yeah. So to come on to the point, if whatever the total number of office hours were previously, it will be fewer. It may be a lot fewer, maybe a little fewer, depends on company sectors and so on, but it will be fewer. But what about the impact on commercial property, both valuations, transactions, redevelopments, and so on? Let's move to that. What it might mean. David at Greg Latchams.
I think it will depend. I still think there'll be a value on space. I think that there's a lot of conversation going on at the moment. It's very interesting, the working from home point, because for some people, they live in a central Bristol flat and they're working in their bedroom, and working from home as a temporary measure was fine, happy with that. But suddenly, hold on, wait, this is going to be the next however long. Like, that's a real question for a lot of people that they're working through at the moment. So there is going to be a need for that traditional office space, but I think it will shift into a bit more communal space. Obviously, there'll be flexible space. As a law firm, we'll need a space that is cordoned off, that obviously by regulations others aren't allowed into. And so it doesn't really matter, I don't think, how many desks or how much space you have now. I think it may well be in total a smaller space, but there's no reason why in time those costs can't be where they are now. I think it might just be a bit of a process.
So perhaps it's the move for some companies, and we shouldn't exaggerate this. For many companies, including several of those watching, they won't be doing this. They don't buy that argument. Don't need to do it. But for some, it will be the office becomes more of a working hub for culture and for meetings, as opposed to I'm at my desk at 7.5 hours a day. Is that the prognosis?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you've got need for less capacity, and that may well come to the contingent leases point, or however the companies may be negotiating out of that, what does it do to overall valuations? Do you take the view that just as certain companies will be coming down in size, so potentially, as we've heard, national companies, London-based companies, may be wishing to come to Bristol either as in part as a regional office or in whole as a national office? What's going to replace if there is going to be less capacity need?
I'm not sure that there'll be sort of less capacity. I think offices will be repurposed. They will become the real social collaborative hub. You need people to sort of be spiky and bounce off each other to create that innovation and ideas. We're seeing, Bristol's a very tech heavy area anyway, and there's a lot of new tech firms being established. There's government grants in respect of mental health, tech. So I think we'll see new players on the sort of online virtual space that actually want office space. So I think if businesses downsize because they no longer need that office, there will be an uptake from the newer startups that have been triggered by this pandemic. And perhaps that's a slightly optimistic view, but...
Cling to it. Cling to it. We all need to. Either of our other two panelists, do you broadly share that optimism that yes, there may be, and David wasn't even quite saying this, but there may be some less capacity, but there's so many new businesses being spawned who will need that space and wish that space.
Yeah, I think you'll find that firms will take less space, and that that will be taken up by other small growing businesses. But there won't be the need for the huge amounts of space that that firms have currently been acquiring in the city. I think that will actually shrink a bit. So.
Are you seeing, and you've sort of touched on this already, but are you seeing an increase in lease disputes that clients are just having to try to get out from under? If not disputes, then sort of renegotiations. Is that a live topic currently?
I think landlords are being faced with a great dilemma. Can they insist on their lease terms and their requirements under those, or do they take a more realistic view? Because otherwise they're going to put pressure on tenants, and I'd rather have a tenant than not have a tenant, is my view. And it's as simple as that. So they've got to take a more realistic view on it. That will impact on their capital value of their investment, though, and it's a fine line that the flexible landlord is more likely to be the one who prevails.
And our two Davids presumably would agree about that flexibility point, particularly that we're all having to find some accommodation in the broader sense in these times, I guess.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think again, from a construction point of view and commercial property, this is all costing, isn't it? There is a cost to all of this, and ultimately, if things can be negotiated and we can work collaboratively to achieve where we want to go, which ultimately is a tenant and a landlord relationship, then that would always be my initial advice and way to go. You need to make a commercial decision on that. And again, from a construction point of view, delays, costs, etc. This is costing. No one's going to want to front up that cost. So hopefully we can negotiate our way out of that. But as I'm already seeing, we're not all in that boat. No. But it's going to be like that.
One of the other current knock-on effects, and it may well be enduring, is people are using public transport much less than before due to fear of contagion for obvious reasons. So will private transport be more or less important once we're through this period than previously? And what impact might that have for commercial space in terms of accessing buildings and so on?
Well, that again is giving a prevalence for people to stay at home and work. If they don't want to use the public transport, and there isn't really an alternative, the council are constantly pushing the car out of the city and making it more difficult. Therefore, why spend time trying to get into it? You're better off doing your work from home. Or a lot of, I think it was one of the Davids said earlier, that a lot of the professional people actually do work outside anyway. They meet clients and go on site, etc. So they're actually out of the office anyway. So why try and get back into the city when you can work from home? So I think there'll be a less drive on public transport than there has been in the past.
What about one of the other trends, which is the repurposing of working space to resi? And if anything, that seems to be slightly less prevalent now than it was a year back. Is that going to be an increased trend, or does somehow the flight from the city run counter to that people want better residential places rather than converting them to commercial?
Yes, I think the permitted development rights have rather allowed secondary poor quality housing to come onto the scene. And that needs to be held back by, I think local authorities ought to have more power on that. than the central government, frankly, because we're going to end up with a lot of secondary housing in the centre of Bristol.
Well, far be it for me to put words in your mouth, but would you wish Bristol Council to either put a hold or to be more questioning about the quality of those sort of reworkings?
Yes, I would. It's the simple answer. I mean, it's their city. They must, they must look at the quality that they're actually creating or being allowed to create.
Are you as a company lobbying in that direction?
Yes, we are. Yeah. As you do.
Yeah, this is the first time you've appeared slightly reluctant in this discussion, Paul. So perhaps tell us a little more, if you can, about the nature of that lobbying and what type of outcomes in reality might come from this.
Well, it's just doing articles and getting the word out there. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah.
We are a relatively small firm. We don't have the ear of the main councillors at the moment, but we're working on it.
Right. Talk about. We'll come on to retail. I do promise that. But can we talk about which areas of Bristol are less hot commercially, but now that might be hotspots in 21, 22, and so on, as the sort of distribution of businesses through the city may change. Where would you see as a potentially interesting growth areas?
Well, during the last couple of months, we've seen deals still going down in Avonmouth, and I don't really see that shifting too much. I know we've got the Southern Link Road and we've got activity out there, but I still think that Avonmouth is still the major hub for industrial distribution. It's got too many assets in terms of links, motorway wise, to not be the main thrust of industrial expansion.
So there is a key strategic and infrastructure point supporting that. What about within the city or closer to the city? Are there areas that you could see would be more promising going forwards than they've been to?
Yeah, you will see the enterprise zone down at St Phillips will see additional, but it has to be said the landowners are looking for the most valuable uses there. So they will, well, they've been previously looking for office uses. Whether that remains to be the case is another matter, but they will look at the most valuable use for that land.
You've touched on tech as a trio. It's one of the obvious growth areas of Bristol in recent years, and it's one of the, at the same time, it's one of the clear winners of this great report's tech as a whole. And yet, in some ways, it's the most equipped to work on a distributed basis. So I just wonder, how significant would you imagine the sector's impact to be on commercial space in 21-22?
I think the Bristol Science Park is, Bath and Bristol Science Park up North Bristol. That actually shows how flexible space works. People go in, they use little modules and small space and expand when they need to. And that is the sort of use of commercial space that I think we'll see more prevalent.
Yeah. I think as well, as I look at it, something like Brabazon, that development, the Whitehall guys, I'm sure they're rubbing their hands. The reality is you've got there, any commercial space will have a ready workforce right there. And I think that's going to change a little bit. It makes me think almost of the, all the guys by the coal mine, all the houses nearby. But the reality is you've got, we're talking about issues of travel and getting to the centre, but actually you've got somewhere slightly outside the centre there that will have commercial use and a ready workforce on site. So I think we might just see shifts in that direction potentially.
Yeah, the sort of the tectonic plates of the city are almost shifting, I guess, to some extent. Yeah. David G, your thoughts about this?
I think with tech firms, they're very good at sort of drawing people in. So perhaps they may not say need the office space, but they need the collaboration space and they need these sort of the demonstration spaces. So you have tech firms that do sort of cooking apps and photograph your what you've made today with the menu, and they want sort of big open plan kitchens to do big demonstrations and sort of get their followers together. You've got sort of media companies that want to bring people together to sort of share expertise. So I can see tech being a real driver in terms of using space differently in Bristol.
Let's come on to retail. As we've discussed briefly before, this has clearly been a long-term trend for obvious, well advanced reasons, which has been accelerated during these times. What is your prognosis about, from a commercial property point of view, about the likelihood of increased space on what is called the high street, but in shopping areas? In recent days, we've heard, M&S cutting 7,000 jobs, Pizza Express confirming 74 outlets to go, etc., etc. Each day is a new sort of storm, basically. But how do you regard that? Do you regard that as a, I don't know, not quite a threat, but is it really an opportunity to repurpose some of that space for other clients? What's been your experience?
Exactly, it is an opportunity to look at new uses, particularly bringing more residential use into the city centre and creating the community. And I think a lot of people would buy into that. I'm actually sat in Weston-super-Mare. Sorry for my sins. The town centre here has shrunk enormously in terms of its occupiers. And there's only one way, it's just too big. Sorry, you can't see my hands, but it's too big, it's to shrink. And these properties either need to be redeveloped or demolished and new ones built and create a greater community. And the same can apply in Bristol. So on a much larger scale, of course.
And I think...
So how do you see that shrinking going? David, you're about to say, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I was talking to retail clients, and they were saying that obviously they need to, it's very easy to sit at home online, look at a screen, order what you want. So from a retail perspective, they need to become experience stores. So they have to draw people in. So one of our retail clients was, for example, talking about the whole store would become a showroom, and you would have one item of clothing for each line rather than, all the different sizes available, with a console and staff to help you pick, and you would order what you want from that console, having seen everything. And then you've got your sort of more, computer game shops that would become more interactive environments where people would go to play computer games and collaborate and experience the tech. So I think we'll see retail shift to a sort of experience type model, something you go to enjoy as opposed to actually shop, with the shopping following up later online.
Yeah,
seeing,
sensification, I guess.
I was just saying, so we see we have some retail deals going through and new projects happening. They're just not in the centre of Bristol. They're further south. They're in some new sort of more emerging suburbs. So where I think retail there'll still be a space for it where there are new communities being born, but then it's how the sector shifts where there is a community or a space already existing.
It may be that there could be a shift towards the independents with a very bespoke, very clear offering, differentiated offering, who know their audience and so on, and then the sort of destination hubs of shopping, because that then is a day out or whatever. It's the stuff in the middle, I guess, which is a bit more complicated.
Mm.
Yeah,
how do you see, if you wound the clock forward, if you looked at, impossible question, but I'll try it. If you looked at Bristol in 2, 3, 4 years' time or some such, you talk about the shrinkage of high street of retail. What might it actually look and feel like? What might have replaced some of that contraction?
Well, like I alluded to earlier, I think you'll see a lot of the secondary, tertiary retail disappear, and the quality of the core retail area will improve, and that will allow the space around it to become habitable again, so we don't have a wasteland around the central core. So that's what I see, and it's opportunity. It's redevelopment again.
There'll be some great stuff coming to market, whether distressed or strategic exits, I guess, and someone will get value. Question of how and who.
It will, yeah. That's another area where there's a big need, is the social housing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me think. If I worked in LA for a while, you said earlier, the centre of LA is that wasteland. There's not a lot going on, but there's just a lot of suburbs, a lot of communities as you move out. I'm not saying Bristol is going to shift into LA, but the centre will change. There will be a different feeling, I think, and I think it will be. We talk Brabazon, we talk the Temple Meads area. There will be that sort of community spaces. I think they will develop and move. You can't see my hands, but I'm moving them out, and I think that's just what we're going to see. The spaces will shift.
Mm.
So to some extent, and again, it's not all cannons to one side, all cannons to the other side, but to some extent, do city centres themselves almost become the social hubs, the social glue, the living culture, whether it's arts when that returns, certainly when it's restaurants, cafes, and so on. Is that the, not quite playground? Is that where it's trending? Do you think?
It will be a living experience. You refer to the arts and leisure. Leisure will come back once this is under control, and that will attract people. And if they want to live there, even better. So.
Let's come on to a more macro point, and Paul, you've touched on this a little bit. This is a government which claims to be avowedly regionalist and non-metropolitan. Any signs of impact from that to the region as a whole? Are you seeing any of those inquiries from larger scale companies wishing to or being encouraged to move here, or even governmental agencies looking to come this way?
Can't say I can comment on that, to be honest. No, it's not my area, I'm afraid.
Okay, I thought you couldn't comment on it because you know something incredibly.
No, I wouldn't trick you on that.
I thought you were merely teasing us. All right, would either of the Davids wish to comment on this point about if there is to be some degree of shift, either active from government or consequential from the flight from the capital and so on? Are you experiencing that? Do you imagine that in any way?
I think we're certainly seeing businesses, obviously with COVID hitting China first, they talk about onshoring, so bringing stuff back from China, manufacturing, sort of research and development, other areas like that. So actually some of that sort of stuff that comes, if you're managing your supply chain risks, you need to have localized operations. So we could see some of that coming back to the regions. It doesn't make sense to have that in London, so we could well see that in Bristol.
True.
David, David M, that is, any thoughts in this direction?
I think that's part of the, as in I see this is a period of growth, even though there's a shrinking going on. I just think it's more long-term development going on for the sustainability of the sectors. And I think as part of that, we will see, so among my clients, there's obviously been shortage in supplies, etc., but they've just had to refocus, come more local, get local skills, and ultimately long-term, that's going to be a good thing. I think obviously it's often crisis that makes you do that, but hopefully this is something that will build something sustainable for the future.
Now, how have some of the national planning changes impacted the commercial sector in Bristol? Perhaps Paul on this.
In what respect do you mean? Do you mean the PDR, permitted development rights?
It may be specifically that, but you mentioned prior to this discussion about how there is a need to reset some of those approaches to planning.
Well, local governments seem intent. I'm not trying to get political here, but they seem intent on power grab and having control from the centre. I am very firmly of the view that the planning of Bristol needs to be dealt with by Bristol, and it ought to be permitted to draw up its own regulations and its own plans, etc. So I do fear the government is trying to drag power away from local authorities and have rules imposed on them, quantums of development, etc., and targets, which is not helpful.
So is it more on that sort of macro numbers setting or whatever, or target setting? That's the issue rather than anything direct?
I think so. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Either of the Davids, do you think that's inhibiting Bristol currently?
I think we need a more streamlined process, and I know for a lot of, certainly my developer clients, I don't think they would necessarily care where the decisions come from, as long as it's a much more streamlined and easier process. I think we've seen central government lead what I think well. Obviously, there might be different views of that, but central government can lead well and can, I think, influence planning well. But so far, it's become so complex. It's such a wide matrix of decisions having to be made by this person, that person, even within a local council. But I think as long as it becomes more streamlined, which we all hope it does, then I think that would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you're if not quite king for a day, but if you could shake up any aspect of city strategic thinking, and you may have touched on this already. I don't know, thinking or planning regs or whatever. What would you do differently that would enable Bristol to prosper yet more going forwards?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
Well, if either of the Davids could infill a little bit whilst Paul is working out exactly how probably
I think that's a tough one, Greg, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of capital in the system. COVID presents a lot of opportunities. Returns are investments in the banks, stock markets, it's volatile. Where opportunities present themselves, people will put money into things. What would drive that? I mean, I think you could ask a magnitude of people and get a completely different set of views from, we want more cycle lanes and ability to avoid traffic to we want sort of more bus routes. Tough. It's a tough question, Greg.
Well, good. Paul, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think before COVID, I would have said you've got to invest in the infrastructure of transport.
Yeah.
But I think the way that COVID has influenced us at the moment, it's difficult to see how that's going to come back. I mean, the scientists will probably tell you a better answer than I. If we can get rid of COVID, then we can go back to the proper way of getting infrastructure for transport into the city and get rid of the cars and make it a more habitable city.
This is a little bit off-piste in terms of the direct discussion we have this morning, but to your point about infrastructure, would you, insofar as you have the detailed knowledge, would you favour or not HS2, given that context about infrastructure investment, but equally different modes of working?
Well, HS2 doesn't really affect Bristol, to be fair.
I know. I was asking from a sort of directional point about infrastructure spends might be.
Would I invest in HS2? I think there's probably better ways to invest money, to be frank. And I'm not sure there's the willingness to actually proceed with it from the north. I don't think they see it as such a great have. They'd rather see connectivity around their own region.
I agree with that.
That's for the north to decide. I'd like to see a little bit more connectivity in the southwest. Yeah,
there's still several not spots, aren't there? And that's one of the inhibitors of business, essentially, or certainly flexibility of business. Again, from I'm looking from a macro point of view. It's not a critical point, but it's more a strategic planning point. The Council and Regional Authority clearly face many challenges, unimaginably complex challenges, compelling and even existential in some cases. Where should they prioritise when seeking to attract businesses to the city?
I think so much that's good about Bristol is still there. I don't think we should detract from the city because obviously COVID's there. I think the reality is what makes Bristol great is very much still there. We all love the city because of so many great things. And I just think I don't think the character will change. I just think the setup might change. And so for me, I'd be singing Bristol's praises and shouting it loudly from the rooftops for people to come because I think that's still there.
It's still a great place to work and socially.
And David G, you'd concur with that, I'm sure, but is there anything else you would wish the Council Regional Authority to do to shout or proclaim how good Bristol is for business?
I think business likes stability, it likes a clear plan. So if they can be clear about what their objectives are, what they're doing, what parts of the city is zoned for what, you know, relaxing rules and regulations as appropriate and be clear about that. So it's where businesses get mixed messages, it's confusing, and then that makes it difficult to draw them in. A clear message, effectively, Greg. Yeah.
Tell us, if you can, tell us a little bit about how some of your clients are approaching these times. What's their appetite for risk, which is one of those four-letter words which seems to crop up only occasionally at the moment. But alternatively, their caution that now is not the time to be considering bolder moves and so on. Without perhaps revealing identities, of course, but where are some of your clients thinking about their prospects?
I mean, as I've said previously, Greg, there's a lot of capital in the system. There's a lot of potential assets that could be snapped up cheaply. You know, initially when COVID hit, we had businesses sort of entrench and think, oh my gosh, what do we do now? And now they're seeing you know, a world of opportunities. They're perhaps simplifying structures, you know, to reduce costs, making use of sort of the loans and things that are available for them for growth, repurposing premises, and redirecting staff. So there's lots of innovation going on. And there's lots of sort of, let's say, blue sky thinking, because actually I think this has given businesses time to have to almost address some difficult questions.
Tell us about current transaction or valuations currently. Is there pressure on valuation, and is that an inhibitor to value overall, or are valuations broadly holding currently?
I think there is pressure on valuations because they see depending on the type of property you're dealing with, but there is pressure on some of the commercial valuations, not so much on the residential and not on the industrial sector, I wouldn't have thought, but on the retail there will be, because there is that uncertainty, and that will hit the yields you apply to the values. So capital values will be affected, which is probably bad news for all of us with pension funds. So,
well, capital will find a home somewhere. So where we have to attempt to follow, I suppose, or perhaps in your case anticipate. But tell us also about lease lengths. You've talked about them being leases being potentially contingent, related to turnover and so on. Are lengths shortening now? The days of 7 and more years as default are going?
Yeah, lease. Well, it's not so much the lease length, but the insertion of break clauses. You're seeing a lot of that now, and lease lengths will stay low. They've been low for quite some time. Even new developments, you can be limited to a lease of 10 to 15 years, which is relatively short considering you're actually constructing a new building based on that. So, but you are seeing break clauses, which reflects the uncertainty that occupiers are seeing. David might have some views on that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're talking about me, I think
Sorry, David Morris. Yeah.
Agreed entirely with that. I think they are shortening, but break clauses certainly being used. I'm aware of a few clients for whom, you know, landlords who would never have seen a break clause being implemented, and they are, and they are having to be creative about how they find new tenants, whether they're splitting places up or whether they're, you know, offering reduced deals. I mean, that's just how it is now. So I agree entirely with Paul. I think there's certainly pressure when it comes to commercial. I think residential will continue to fly, to be honest. A little blip, but it's still going.
What about the co-working hubs that were beginning to proliferate in a couple of years prior to this time? What do you think is the prognosis for that as a business model, as a use of commercial property in Bristol?
I think it's got a good future. I think it's the ideal way for these embryonic firms to join together and use their experience. So I think that is. And I think you'll see more of it as buildings become reshaped that will be one of the models that come forward.
So a potential winner, if it's a bit crass to use the term winner, I guess, but potential beneficiary of this time, maybe that business model.
But I think the owners of those buildings actually need to take that on board and look at reshaping what they're offering to the market.
I agree. I think you'll see law firms, accountancy firms, professional services firms, which may not have ever considered using such hubs, either having their own hub or being involved in certain hubs as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you'd cohabit, I guess, with other professional services, but maybe not with another legal firm. I don't know. You, David Morris, that is. But
I don't make those decisions, but
that's
having another law firm on the door doesn't probably look quite so good. But there we go.
That's the pay grade answer. But
I think so.
but these times are forcing odd partnerships and collaborations. I mean, maybe perhaps you've seen this, not necessarily with rival firms. I'm slightly joking saying that. But in terms of the partnerships that are required to get work done are ever more important.
Definitely.
Yeah,
yes.
you can get good spin-off by collaborating with other associated professionals in close proximity, and that does benefit.
And that's always been one of the strengths of Bristol, given its lovely size. It's a large, small city. And that has great benefit in terms of relationships and partnerships. David Gage, you're about to say something.
I was just going to say, Greg, that property professionals historically have been very good at collaborating. You often get developers flipping land to another developer because they've decided not to develop it out. They're an entrepreneurial group anyway. So anything that brings them together will just drive more collaboration. But I think historically we've seen that anyway.
Well, this may also be slightly crass to say, but we say anything that brings them together. Of course, there is something called the Bristol Property Awards, which Smith & Williamson are a headline sponsor of. And
absolutely.
We use, it's a bit euphemistic, but we do use expression about convivial business meetings after the awards. The awards are a catalyst for getting people together, of course, and those partnerships and relationships are incredibly important. What's also been really important, and we'll come to perhaps our last point here, which is just how touching it's been to see the people and businesses of Bristol creating clever ways to support and help where they can during these times. We've been sharing those through our channels, not through Bristol Life, although that will be coming back very shortly on September 18th, but on, September 19th. But through our social media channels and our email marketing and so on, using a hashtag of Bristol Together. It has been quite remarkable how good-spirited people have been. And if I could ask you each, perhaps start with you, David Morris, something that struck you in these times of how Bristol people have cooperated and helped each other.
Yeah, I think a personal one for me, we now know all our neighbours. People on the street. There's a local Facebook group, and certainly my wife's been pretty active on that. And some of them were, in the sort of the 12-week bracket that had to stay locked down, and so. I think we took a roast over at one point, which I would never have imagined doing. But it brings people together, doesn't it? And we recognise a need on our doorstep. And to just see that so close to home has been wonderful.
And let's hope something of that spirit endures on the other side. Paul, your thoughts here?
Yeah, the thing that touched me was the work my wife does as a doctor's receptionist. And she's been working from home, but contacting all the over 60s, the patients they are. They're not customers, they're patients.
They sort of increasingly feel like customers, but yeah.
But, it's all a matter of well-being. And the conversations go on for half an hour, but it keeps them interested and checks up that they're getting food, they're getting prescriptions and things like that. And it's great work. And I'm really proud of her.
Brilliant. That's really nice. That's really nice indeed. And David Gage, your last thoughts here, please.
I think as an office, we've the Bristol Smith & Williamson office, we've always sort of contributed to fair share historically, and to be honest, COVID has just upped the ante, so there's been a lot more sort of fundraising around that. I believe the firm made quite a big donation. And there's been various initiatives around the office, sponsored bike rides, things like that, to raise money. I've also seen clients where they've had quite senior members of staff struck down by COVID, spend a long time in hospital, and they've gone out and raised money for local hospitals and done very well doing that.
Yeah. Well, as I say, let's hope that we cling to the belief that in these really tough times, enduringly tough times for many people, that people do give of their best during these times, and that at least it will endure in subsequent times. We're going to close now and thank our panelists this morning, David Gage of Smith & Williamson, Paul Matthews of Vickery Holman, and David Morris from Greg Latcham's. Thank you also to Bevan Britton, our sponsors of the Bristol Life Business Club. Please look out for those Bristol Life Awards, headlined by Marsh Commercial on September 17th. Different You, Beglam, a major occasion to bring thousands of Bristol people, organisations and businesses together. Please make sure you get your nominations in for the Bristol Property Awards. They close on September 30th. It covers the period to the end of March of this year, so effectively pre-COVID. We know this hasn't necessarily been the best of times for all businesses, but the awards do cover that period. And then come the occasion on February the 12th, it'll be great to bring everyone together once more. And of course, look out for Bristol Life's return on September 18th. We just can't wait. Please do talk to us, whether editorially or commercially. This today has been a Media Clash production. This has been a commercial property special version of the Bristol Life Business Club. Thank you. Bristol together. Thank you. Thanks a lot.